Is this the beginning of the end for Vladimir Putin? For hours on Friday and Saturday, Russian President Vladimir Putin was in danger of losing control of the country he had led for more than 2 decades. Wagner Group mercenary leader Yevgeny Prigozhin protested Saturday night as the army advanced into Moscow, ending what many saw as a coup attempt. According to the agreement, Prigozhin agreed to withdraw the armed forces of the Russian capital, withdraw the army from the city of Rostov-on-Don, and leave Russia to Belarus. There is no doubt that this event brought the end of Putin's iron-fisted rule over Russia. The question now is how valid this is and whether it will face another challenge soon. Attack. Since it became clear that the invasion of Ukraine will not lead to the victory Putin and his leaders expected, discontent has arisen in the Kremlin. The complaint has now been made public. Without Putin's strong opposition, his policies would have been more challenging. Even if there is an uprising in the military against Putin, there is always hope. It is safe to say that it is no longer needed. The side of the Kremlin person told the Daily Beast. Others agree that Prigozhin would not act without the approval of at least some figures in Putin's inner circle. Good day for Ukraine. Prigozhin's impudent journey comes true as Ukraine starts fighting to reclaim Russian lands in the east of the country. Military operations announced this month have slowed, as confirmed by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The crisis in the Kremlin can only help Zelensky's cause and give him the support of Western groups whose support is crucial. Russia's weakness is clear, Zelensky said on Saturday. Weakness. Ukraine has no intention of taking over Moscow or overthrowing Putin, but the events of the last 48 hours have made it clear that the Kremlin has no control over its internal affairs, let alone relations, war, and its military activities are in decline. Ukrainian fans can now argue that victory is not only possible, but also closer than expected. Murders, prosecutions that lead to long prison sentences, unfair elections to suppress opposition, things democracy leaders cannot use to stay in power. Ukraine remains loyal to the Kremlin. Putin may live for now, said journalist Ivo Dard on his Twitter account. However, he added that the last 24 hours raised serious questions about his dominance over power. The Kremlin needs to emphasize that everything is the same, how much has changed. For 36 hours, the end of Russian President Vladimir Putin's rule was seen. Almost every action was impossible a week ago, and many actions were unthinkable 17 months ago. Prigozhin said that a regular said that he attacked the site of the occupation, after which the attack aircraft targeted his army, after which he smoothly captured a large military town and traveled hundreds of kilometers from Moscow. But as the Kremlin claimed that Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, whom Putin despised, had complained that the rebels had gone to Moscow in armor and had now chosen to break in, he suddenly took a surprising turn and turned to avoid bloodshed. Exile in Minsk. Even if things settle down, it won't make much sense. It is important to remember that we have not yet heard from Yevgeny Prigozhin that he agreed to flee to Belarus, and we have not seen evidence of the whole truth of his army. He is a public supplier of false information. We should also be skeptical of the footprint of Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov's attempt to link Saturday night's tragic event with it. Wagner was at the gates of the capital almost 2 hours ago, and then suddenly everything was forgiven. Much of the story is missing. We may not know what they are. Many different personalities can replace Prigozhin's education. Is it too easy to push north? Did he admit that despite the weak Russian army, entering the capital would make his men vulnerable? Don't have enough employees to join? Does he believe that making promises will only make him famous? On the surface, Prigozhin's deal made him weak, even successful. He had been the decision-maker for the past 36 hours. He protested Putin. Silent at first, then angry and confident, he swears the inevitable punishment of scum. But after a few hours everything was forgotten. Putin's heart is, if known, arguably less than his character. He looked like the weakest in 23 years, letting Prigozhin go and apparently keeping all opposition. Private services to Wagner and his supporters, which have been out of sight for the past 2 days, will now gradually increase. But the Kremlin's response to the issue will likely backfire. The move undermines everything Putin stands for and only shows that he has no choice. He is powerless to make sure he can stop Prigozhin. This is perhaps the biggest lesson to be learned from the so-called March for Justice. Not that the mercenary leader sent a small force to Moscow to protest, but the Kremlin had to let him go. Putin's vulnerability is clear. Putin's position has clearly been weakened by the devastating effects of the war. But officials and analysts are unsure how to remove it and under what circumstances it would be allowed. This is not an option. But it's happened now. We've seen behind the thick curtain that the Kremlin hides its struggle, incompetence, and weakness, and allows it to be self-confident in its post-Soviet omnipotence. It looks ugly in there. Now the rest of the world sees it too, from Ukraine to NATO and Putin's friends. It is worth noting that some friends remain silent. Kazakhstan and Iran, which had debts to Russia in the past, described this as an internal problem. This is not unconditional support. We can only speculate whether the idea of Prigozhin in power will create fear among the elite huts on the Moscow suburbs and support Putin. However, his shortcomings were identified for the first time in 23 to 20 years, when he made many enemies and borrowed money. It's surprising to think that the last 2 days have been a hoax designed to improve Putin's position or provide an excuse to escalate further tensions. This is an internal and destructive state of affairs, influenced by the needs of war. Show the Kremlin leader so blatantly weakness does not strengthen his position. So where is Russia and its annoying rivals headed? We don't know what will happen next, but it seems to follow the volatile pattern of the last 2 days. Prigozhin may have been gone for months. Putin can make some tweaks to his army. Everything will look normal. But they have changed radically, and the post-Putin world and the superpowers that should control it looms before us. It was like the beginning of the end for him.